Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today, our special guest is Jacob Benzaquen, and Jacob is talking to us from Seattle, Washington. Is that right, Jacob?
It is. I'm up here in Seattle.
And how's the weather there? I know it's April Fool's Day, so we don't have to tell the truth.
It is, about 75 and sunny out right now. It's just wonderful this time of year.
Yeah, I don't believe you. It's April Fool's Day.
It's like 50 and rainy.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit more Seattle-like down here in the Bay Area. But yeah, I noticed that you got your NABCEP PV Design Specialist certification recently. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And then how long has it been? And then how much has your life changed since then, since you got that?
Oh man. So it's been about 3 weeks to a month since I got it now at this point. I think that I recommend everybody do it because my life has just substantially improved since I got this.
Wow. And I was even just kind of joking around because I knew it was so recent, but that's pretty cool. Maybe you could tell us how your life changed since you got this great NABCEP PV Design Specialist certification.
Honestly, I think the biggest improvement has really come from just studying everything. It just day-to-day working life has been, I think, much easier, kind of understanding the basics behind all of the code, knowing what we can and can't do, just kind of more off the top of my head, and if not, where to put it. And then, of course, showing it off a little bit. I feel really proud to have gotten it and excited to have it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, like usually people talk about getting a certification and they go like, "Oh, it helped me get this job because everybody knows that I'm certified and stuff." But in reality, probably like the big part of the certification is it makes you study and then you learn a whole bunch of stuff and then you're smarter and then you got more confidence and your life changes because of that too, not just because you've got more letters after your name.
Yeah, I feel like it will help me find jobs. It'll help open up doors. It'll help open up a lot of things for me. But at the end of the day, I think it was really important for me myself to understand what I'm doing in my day-to-day work.
Yeah, and so like you told me before, and it's like that we are recording this, I've said on April Fool's Day, and we have a lot of podcasts in the queue, so it'll be a little while before it gets released. But you're getting a new job, right? So you're going from residential solar to community solar.
Yeah,
Cool.
so going up from, 10 to 50 kilowatts to 1 to 5 megawatts about.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And so, well, 50 kilowatts, that's a big house.
it's a big house. Yeah.
You got some of those like people in Boeing or Microsoft that are running the show that
We get some pretty big, crazy houses up here. I've done a large ground mount or two as well. But yeah, some of the houses up here, especially like along the lake and on the east side, like Bellevue, are just huge.
you're doing like Gates and Allens and Bezos and all those people.
I've been kind of waiting for the day for like a Bill Gates to kind of come through my queue, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of PV system those guys have. So that's pretty cool. So like you've been in the residential, but you switched over. And so getting that job happened after you got the PV design specialist, right?
That is correct. Yeah. So I didn't apply to the job when I had that, but in the middle of the interview process, I got to bring up that, hey, I have this,
Oh, cool.
by the way, I have this PV design specialist certificate now.
And you have to pay me twice as much now? Is that
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, congratulations too. I know you were just telling me that you just got the job. So
Yeah.
today, wow.
Today. Yeah.
And we've scheduled this earlier, so that wasn't why we
It just
scheduled this or
lined up
anything.
perfect. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And so you're making a move too. You're going from the Seattle area. So you're going from like moisture to wind. Is that about what's happening
Moisture to wind, snow, a lot of snow.
in Chicago? Yeah.
Yeah. I love Chicago a lot. It's one of my favorite big cities. I'm from the Midwest, originally from Wisconsin. So it'll be nice to make that move back home. And my partner's family is from Pittsburgh too. So, it's a good kind of middle point in between both of our families.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So for the community solar, so maybe we could even kind of explain what community solar is. Maybe you can explain it.
Ooh, I think that you would probably be a little bit better at it than I would. I would like to learn a little bit more about it from you, actually.
Okay, so community solar is like, we're all a big community. It's kind of related to what sometimes people would call virtual net metering. And it doesn't happen everywhere. You need the right kind of laws to make it happen. So some states it's bigger than other states if people that are listening don't know too much about it. And what happens is there's a lot of people out there that can't put solar on their roofs. They don't own the roof. They live in an urban area. They live where there's apartment buildings, where they don't have access to the rooftop. They have condos, all that kind of stuff. And what happens is there will be a solar project that's put up somewhere else distant from where you live, not too far usually, like probably, in the same city or something like that. Like I said, it could be different rules for different places. And then the energy that gets made from that project goes out there and credits the people that don't have the roof space. Or another thing that's giving people problems, not just roof space, but they want to be mobile. They might be like you and they want to go get a job and move on a month's notice or something like that. And so they don't want to make the big investment in a PV system if they're going to move. And so with community solar, they can do that. And I know I've had like podcasts with people that are involved with community solar. And I've done work for other companies too. Like there's Dimension Energy in New Jersey, and they're a community solar company. And part of the deal that they have over there is they have to give back to the community. And what they're doing to give back to the community is they're doing solar classes. And so I come in and they advertise for these spots in the classes. They're all paid for, and they pay for their NABCEP exams, and they partner with community colleges. Like there's Rowan College, Raritan College, and different places around Jersey, South Jersey, that's the Philly area and stuff like that. And then people come in to the class and they get jobs, or sometimes they're already in the industry and they're just like, wow, what a deal, a free class. And so stay tuned too. Like the next one I do, I will announce it on my website, and then people can get a free class that's worth could be worth thousands of dollars, because it's not just my class that they do too. They'll have other things and do OSHA training and pay for NABCEP exams and all that kind of stuff. So we're working on some of that stuff, but it's pretty cool. It's a good way to get people involved with solar. And it's kind of like a crossover, I guess you would say, between like residential and utility scale. It's like if residential and utility scale had a baby, that's what would happen. Community solar.
I think that that's really, really like important to me too, because I felt like I was really lost in what I wanted to do. And I felt like I wanted to be able to make a little bit bigger difference in my community. And I like working on an individual house by house basis with homeowners. I think it's really important in the long run to be able to support all of these people who can't put solar onto their roofs.
Yeah, yeah. And then I also like to differentiate between community solar and community choice aggregation, which is oftentimes abbreviated as a CCA. And so like where I live, actually the city where I'm sitting in, we're not part of a CCA because my city council is lame. They stink. And, thumbs down for Orinda City Council. And also, just while I'm giving like anti-advertisements, I want to say that Home Depot stinks. I had a delivery problem with them just today. I was like, 2 days of waiting for stuff. But no, and then, so the CCA though, is all of the cities surrounding Orinda are part of a CCA. My friend wrote the law, which is what got me into solar. And so I was hanging out over at Jerry Brown's house in between his two-term runs as governor of California. And he was just like a community organizer doing Tai Chi and all kinds of cool stuff over at his house in Oakland. And I met this guy, Paul Finn, and he wrote this law because he was just this crazy philosopher that he's like, instead of writing philosophy books, I want to write laws. And he's like super smart with all these honors. And he wrote this law. And now like a good portion of the United States, like well over 10% of people in the US get their electricity through a CCA. So what it does is it keeps the utility alive. Like they're not just taking out the utility, but they're decoupling the purchasing of the electricity from distributing the electricity. So the utility still gets to distribute the electricity, but the CCA gets to go out there and buy the electricity, and it always tends to be greener and less expensive than the utility.
So they're acting as like a middleman in between the utility and the customer.
Yeah, kind of sort of like there's all these different power plants and they're just going like, okay, solar farm, okay, wind farm, and it's not 100% green, it's just greener. So
Okay.
unfortunately, they still are purchasing some electricity from natural gas or something like that. Boo.
Ooh.
But it's greener. And then usually what you do is you have choices. So you can get like their regular mix, which is just a little bit cheaper and a little bit greener than the utility, which is, still better. Or you can get like the, whatever they call it, deep green or something like that, where you're purchasing 100% renewables.
Okay. Got it.
And so it's like really big in California, Massachusetts, and Ohio. Those are the places where the CCAs have really
Yeah.
taken off. And
I was gonna say we're spoiled up here in Seattle. Our electricity prices are, I mean, right now at like 14 cents a kilowatt hour and
yeah,
over 90% hydroelectric.
I know. Yeah, isn't that awesome that it's all
It's
hydro?
really
So,
great.
so yeah, that's where like it seems to me like the further north you go, the more hydro you go. Even in Alaska, you
Hmm.
think it might be frozen, but I lived in Alaska and it was like hydropower, even to this small city that I lived in called Haines. And so it's pretty cool to have all that hydropower, but it makes it
Hmm.
so there's not that much solar going on because the electricity is so inexpensive and it's already green.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why I don't get to go to Seattle much. I think I might have been there once as a solar participant because it's just like, Columbia River and all that stuff. They're just like really cheap electricity. And they got all that water coming out of the sky, which makes it a little bit more difficult for the sunshine to hit the PV modules too, because there's not as much sunshine. There's more water coming out of the sky.
And we have one-to-one net metering as well
Hmm.
here too.
Yeah,
So, people installing batteries for time of use to kind of offset their electricity bill doesn't really happen either. It's
yeah,
pretty much
yeah.
just for straight backup,
Hmm.
kind of what I think the consequence of all of that is that usually the people putting solar is pretty kind of price locked for people up here because that payback period ends up being, 13, 16 years.
Wow.
They
Yeah, yeah.
decide it's not worth it for them.
Yeah, that makes it tough. So you have like dark skies and low insolation. So insolation, incident solar radiation, that just means how much sun you get. Average day throughout a year is usually the metric that people use for the insolation, peak sun hours per day. But, that's just the way it is. And at least you're making it work to some degree. I mean, you have a solar job in Seattle, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
We're very busy and there's maybe three or four pretty big ones out here. I'm not sure
Yeah.
how they're doing right now, but we're rocking and rolling right now. So I feel pretty lucky to just, I mean, with everything going on, to still be doing as well as we're doing up here.
Yeah. And even though that where I'm living, we have more sunshine and we have more expensive electricity. So our
Mhm.
electricity is something like 40, 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's a little bit more, huh?
Yeah.
But
And
we
net
don't
metering
have,
rates are,
yeah, but we don't have that one-to-one net metering. But still, as the prices go up, it compensates for it. And then you just will get the batteries.
yeah.
And there are some people I know that just are like, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And they're just completely going off grid. I'm seeing more and more DIYers that are just like, they have some electrical knowledge. Like this one guy, he does electrical wiring for movie sets, is like all temporary wiring and stuff like that. I know that he like loves to label things. I guess that's probably a movie industry thing. And so he went to the dump,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're throwing PV modules in the dumpster. And he's like, I'll take those. Yeah. And he's like, I'll take those. And he takes them and he puts them up and he just like disconnected from the grid. And I think he has
Uh-huh.
like an extension cord that he can use to charge his
Oh
battery
boy.
if he needs it, you know?
Just is he just have like a big bank of like lead acid
Yeah.
batteries?
Just he got like used lead acid batteries probably at the dump too, or I forget if it's the dump or some
Some
way he
some
got some.
scrapyard of
Yeah.
dumper. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like old lead acid batteries, he figured
Yeah.
those out.
I love hanging out on like the electricians subreddit or the solar subreddit. And you see a lot of that like DIY type stuff that, part of me as a professional in the industry really cringes at sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Other times it's almost just borderline impressive
Yeah. Yeah.
how
Yeah.
people hack stuff together.
Yep. Yeah. The good part is it's really cool. It's like they're putting in the effort, they're making clean energy and all that stuff. And then,
Hmm.
then you're like, well, I hope they don't burn anything down.
I'm like, ooh, yeah, there's a code violation. There's a code
Uh-huh.
violation. There's a code violation.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Those guys don't know. I'm sure some of them don't even know what the NEC is.
Probably not.
Uh-huh. Like the NEC, I've never heard of it. But there's this great YouTube video, or one of my favorite ones too was like some guy was showing you, this is even an old one, it's probably like 8 years old or something.
Hmm.
Some guy showing you how to make a power wall. And he like was soldering together these solar cells. He got an Alibaba and puts it in a wooden box. And then he wrote the Tesla symbol on it or something. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's all that Tesla's doing too, right?
Yeah, I know. They're just going to Alibaba, same thing.
It's the same thing. I
Yeah.
would do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Another neat thing or kind of interesting thing is I just bought a used Nissan Leaf
Okay.
for 3,200 bucks.
Ooh, nice.
And so it's a 2011. Its range is not good. Like the guy that I bought it from, he's like, it's 30 miles. And I don't know, he's probably right. Like I haven't even tried it out that much. But the cool thing about it too is that the Nissan Leaf, you've always pretty much always been able to use it to export. So I could like power the house and stuff. So
Okay.
in one way, even if the wheels fell off, it's like an energy storage system for the house. I mean, I guess
Like the Tesla Power Share type thing.
yeah, yeah, something like that, like a Powerwall or I shouldn't say that, a Franklin or, I don't want to be all brand specific and take sides, especially in this
You can't do that now.
heated times. But yeah, it's like even though the battery what used to be 24 kilowatt hours and maybe it's half of that or something like that,
Hmm.
that is equivalent of like your average residential battery you stick on your wall.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
And I could take it to the store. In fact, I could take it to the store if I was out of power and the store wasn't, and they had an EV charger there, and I could fill it
Hmm.
up with electrons and bring those electrons home.
Do you know what the capacity is in that battery?
I believe I looked it up with ChatGPT, and I saw 24 kilowatt hours is what it came
Okay.
with, like when it was
Okay.
new.
So like two power walls,
Yeah, kind of
just
crazy. And
under.
yeah, I know. Yep. And it's also like my other car is more than triple of that. I've got 85 kilowatt hours in my car that I bought used.
Hmm.
It's got the bigger battery though. And I was looking like there's a way to, redo the batteries in it, but it seems like it might be kind of labor intensive. But then the other thing too is it's like, it's actually kind of a cool car. It's like, it's got a lot of speed. It's
Hmm.
really solid. It turns a lot sharper than my other bigger car.
Easier to parallel park, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's really easy to parallel park. It's just like a clean car. It seems like kind of good to drive, and it, definitely takes off and goes fast up hills and up the freeway and all that kind of stuff.
I feel like it's one of those cars that's it's just a great secondary car. People, I think, overestimate how much they need a lot of range when most of the time, they're driving 1 mile away to the grocery store and that
Yeah,
car would be
yeah,
perfect for it.
yeah, yeah, perfect for that. And I actually got it because my stepbrother flew into town and he's doing construction work for me.
Okay.
And I was like going to rent him a car, and I was like, well, should I spend $1,000 or should I get a battery? You know,
Might as
and
well.
I
Yeah.
let him use my car because I'm experimenting with this one, and it's pretty cool. Yep,
No, yeah, I like that a lot.
yep. And then I know this guy too that it's also doing electrical work with me, and his father. Actually, I'm going to have him on the podcast. His name's Dean
Okay.
Cornell, and he's like smart with all kinds of electrical stuff. I think he's 37. He was taken home from the hospital in an electric vehicle, like homemade with batteries.
Okay.
And his father has this famous red Carmen Ghia that's like won all these shows and stuff. I think it was at like 1984 or something around there, and is when he made this car.
Hmm.
And he's got a bumper sticker on it that says, "I've been driving EVs since Elon was 10."
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome. Does that
yeah.
Leaf use what kind of charger does that use? That still use the J1772
Yeah, it's got the J1772 and it also has the Chatamo. So it's got two, like, so I lift up the front.
DC fast charging?
Yeah, so it could do DC fast charging, and that's the one that they would do the exporting with is the Chatamo.
Got it.
And so that's popular in Japan. I think it's like a French word or something, Chad de Mouve, something like that. And it's pretty good for exporting. So I had some other people from Fermata Energy on the podcast maybe a year or so ago, something like that.
Okay.
Like two
Yeah.
different C-level people from that company, and they're in Virginia. And like David Slutsky, I think it was his company that he founded. And
Okay.
they were swearing by the CHAdeMO being like really good for, bidirectional or, exporting and all
Hmm.
that. And so it's got the DC, like you're saying, DC fast charging, and then you just get an inverter on the wall. In fact, after interviewing the guy for the podcast, if I didn't learn from him when I was interviewing him, I wouldn't have bought this car, because then it was like, yeah, you could do it. The Nissan Leafs, they've been able to do it for a long time. And I want to, get one of those inverters. In fact, I just emailed him about it, the possibility this morning to get one of these bidirectional inverters. Then another company that does it too, that I've been to their headquarters in Barcelona, is called Wallbox.
Okay.
And they have a bunch of Nissan Leafs. They have this project that I actually learned about it because I'm on the Intersolar jury for Intersolar in Germany. And I'm on the Outstanding Projects Committee. And so we gave an award to this Wallbox headquarters. And they had
Hmm.
like, instead of getting transmission from the grid and upgrading the transmission lines, they just got a bunch of batteries, which were happen to be inside of Nissan Leafs. And so they have all
I
these
see.
Nissan Leafs in their parking lot that are hooked up to their, EV supply equipment, I guess is the more correct way to say it, EVSE. That's what the
Uh-huh.
NEC says, which is like essentially a bidirectional, charger inverter. It goes both ways, DC to AC, AC to DC. And so that was pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Do you have to do a some sort of islanding device then too for when you're using this leaf to isolate it from the grid?
Yeah, so I mean it's the same exact as any kind of battery inverter. I mean it's the same thing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so the charger, it would be just like if I had a battery without wheels, you
Hmm.
know. And so I just get this inverter and it can charge the battery or discharge the battery. And I would need to, if I'm going to connect to the grid, I would need an interconnection agreement.
Yep.
And if I wasn't going to connect to the grid and just do battery backup, then I would need an interconnection agreement.
How do you feel about the industry as a whole then moving towards the next charger, the Tesla one? Because I feel, do you know if there's stuff that like the CHAdeMO can do that that one can't? My understanding was that that one could do basically everything that the other one could do in a much smaller package.
Yeah, so the Tesla one now, they've called it the North American Charging Standard, NACS, is like the new name for the Tesla charger. And it's definitely like smaller than the CHAdeMO,
Hmm.
but pretty much kind of what's going on, I think, is like the car itself has a little computer in it. The charger that you plug into the car has a little computer in it. And those little computers talk to each other and they kind of do a handshake and they decide, are we going to send electrons this way or are we going to send those electrons that way?
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm not an expert in as far as like what's inside of the software and how all that stuff's working, but of course, everybody is going to talk up their own solution, and say ours is the best. But from a user perspective, I'm thinking like they're both going to kind of do the same thing. It's sort of like this Nissan Leaf, I will be able to plug it in to like have a Tesla charger. I'll be able to
Hmm.
plug it into that with just like this adapter that I bought on Amazon
Yeah.
and I'll just put it on and it'll do the AC charging. If I wanted to do DC charging, it won't work because the J1772 or the J plug won't work for DC with this one. That's why they have the CHAdeMO, but that one would
Hmm.
do it. So if I wanted to go to a supercharger, as long as like Tesla let me plug it in, which I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but they might. I know they're letting other cars on their
And
network.
they do have a CHAdeMO adapter now too.
Yeah, so then I would have to go to the Tesla North American Charging Standard to the CHAdeMO for the car, and then that would work too. So they're just like all these adapters, Like when I bought my other car, so I have a Model S, and I bought it used about 6 years ago, and it came with all kinds of adapters. It has a CHAdeMO adapter. I think one time I tried to plug it in, but it didn't work because the charger didn't work. Like, so often you go to a charging station and the charger doesn't work. And all the time I do the J1772. Like, in fact, when I bought a charger for my house, I bought
Hmm.
the 1772 because I knew that I could plug any car into that because I
Yep.
already had the adapter to plug it into the Model S. But now
Yeah.
I'm going to have one that goes the other way too. So,
Yeah, and I have a Model 3 and I use 772 as well. Just
yeah.
we have like street charging around. Unfortunately, I do not have any charging in my apartment right now. So it was an oversight by me when I bought the car, of
Oh, huh.
course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do that most of the time anyway, and supercharge as needed. It's much more expensive.
Yeah. And so I have a Model S that's 2015, and halfway through 2016, they got rid of free supercharging for life. So my car has free supercharging for life. Even if I
Oh,
sold it to you, you would get
wow.
it. And so all of the Elon haters out there, don't trash my car, don't wreck it, because I'm using my car to make Tesla go broke by taking all those electrons from them, right?
Oh, yeah. Please don't trash mine as well. I need to sell it eventually, but I
Uh-huh.
don't think that I can at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. But yeah, I went to Walnut Creek, which is a town near me, and I was just there on a Saturday one time, and there's like 1,000 people or something just
Hmm.
out there like protesting in front of the Tesla dealership. It was like the biggest thing I've seen since, Occupy, all that stuff happened for like 2008. So,
Hmm. There's been quite a few protests up here too, believe it or not. Downtown's been pretty occupied the last couple of weeks, and a few of the Tesla dealerships. I've seen a few Teslas get like firebombed over
oh
here.
my
People are
God.
like, I've seen three of them get hit by Molotov cocktails
Wow, you
in
guys are
Seattle.
rowdy up there.
People are rowdy.
Wow.
Part of me like, I get the sentiment, but don't hurt my car, please.
Yeah. And I kind of think that with any kind of protest, I remember like during all that Occupy stuff, it was kind of funny. I was meeting some friend in Oakland that I hadn't seen in years.
Hmm.
And it was funny. He was like, let's meet at the whatever. It was the Bulldog. It was just the cannabis place. And I was like, "Ah,
Hmm.
okay." I quit doing all that stuff. So I wasn't in there smoking out or anything like that. But I was just like,
Okay.
okay, cool. Let's go check it out. Sounds like fun. And then all of a sudden, all these people are marching down the street. And it was like the Occupy in Oakland. And then we're like, let's go walk around and check this thing out. It's like, yeah, down with Wall Street, woo! And then we were walking down the street, and they're like throwing tear gas.
Oh man.
And then I remember like some guy got seriously injured, like he might still have brain damage. I think it was called like a flash grenade or something like that.
Okay.
I remember I like posted some of this stuff on YouTube, but it was kind of crazy. And so one of the things that I've noticed that happens with protests, and I've kind of like, I think it makes us American to protest no matter what you're protesting for. I think it's
Agreed.
good to express yourself, but then there's always a couple of people in every protest that are the ones that are like, let's break stuff.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, like when I've been at a protest where there's people that are breaking stuff, it's like 90% or 99% of people are going, stop it. And then there's just like somebody
Most
that's
people
like,
want a peaceful resolution. I think people like to focus, and it's easy to
"Mm,
focus on those outliers. But
yeah, yeah,
at the end of the day, I think most humans just want a good solution for what they're fighting for.
yeah, yeah. And then there's the one person or just a couple of people out of 1,000. And they're like, no, let's break some windows. And
Yeah.
they're like, it's finally my chance to break windows and get away with it.
Yeah,
I-
exactly.
Like I remember in Oakland, I was going to this 24-hour fitness, and all the windows were broken. It was like it was terrible. What happened? There was this guy Oscar Grant who got, I guess the Bart, that's the police officer,
Hmm.
thought that he was shooting him with a stun gun, and he just pretty much shot him in the back of the head or something like that. And it was, even if it was a stun gun, it was just like the guy was already surrendered. It was on video and everything. The guy was down on the ground and gun to the back of his head, and it was terrible. But then, so that, yeah, they tore up my gym, all that kind of stuff. So I was working out with like plywood on the windows.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Madison when there were like riots in 2022, and I think all of the damage pretty much was just people who came in after the fact, after it was already full, and started, breaking stuff, and that's kind of what led to the bad experiences with for the whole night.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of think a lot of times when there's a protest, there's another side that's against the people that are protesting. It's like politics and all that kind of stuff. And they're like, oh, these people were planted in there. Like
Mhm.
they're always using that, like, oh, somebody was planted in here. And I don't know if necessarily anybody was planted in these protests. There's just some people, it's like, I want to break some windows, man. Give me a reason to bust some stuff.
It's just that crowd mentality, I think if
Yeah.
you're feeling predisposed to that and
Hmm.
you're in a place where you feel like you won't get in trouble,
Hmm.
then people act on it.
Yeah, just like there's always, if there's some house that nobody lives in out in the wilderness, some kids are going to break its windows, you know?
It's just bound to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like however many, it might take some years, but, that's just what happens. Yeah.
Mhm.
Good old vandalism. It's probably not even protesting. It's just like a protest is a good time for vandalism.
Agreed. Not so much together. They just happen to kind of go hand in hand with
Yeah.
each other.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. So yeah, you're doing residential, you're going to community solar. It sounds like it might be a step to utility scale.
Yeah, potentially, maybe right below utility scale.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a good stepping point for me. I feel like there's a lot more job security within larger commercial systems, utility scale systems, because all of this stuff is going to keep getting cheaper, hopefully, and ultimately people in power are going to pick what costs the least amount of money. So I don't necessarily foresee the demand for, like larger commercial and utility scale systems from going down. And like what I said earlier, I think, being able to make a little bit bigger, a little bit more of a difference on a big picture scale is going to be really awesome too.
You want to hear something funny? Is like right before we got on the podcast, a guy called me, and like I always get these sales calls from people that seem like they're just trying to sell me something, and he's trying
Yeah.
to sell me leads.
Okay.
Did you ever get those calls or like,
I do. I'm not even in sales and I still get those calls.
yeah, and they're like, I could sell you qualified leads. And I think it's because I have a solar contractor's license or something.
Hmm.
And I always go like, well, are the people getting the leads NABCEP certified? And he's like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. A
Yeah,
couple
yeah,
times he
yeah.
said, oh yeah, they are. And I know that they always say yes, almost always. I think one time I had a guy that didn't say yes. So like I had one honest guy. And then when they say yes, I go like, oh, what's their name? And then I look them up on the NABCEP website. And of course, there's
Not
nobody
there.
there. And then they try to come up with some kind of bad excuse. And I could just tell that this guy was just the classic, misrepresentation guy that's
Hmm.
selling leads from people that were just like lying through their teeth and stuff like that. And so I was like, do you want to be on my podcast? And he's like, yeah. And so I was like, send me an email. I got to get on the podcast right now and we'll talk.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping to like troll this guy on the podcast. So I think that'll be like
Amazing.
awesome.
Maybe don't let them hear this one first.
Oh, will it be too late? Yeah, because it'll take a little while to release it. And so, yeah, we'll get him on there. And who knows? I mean, the guy's not going to even listen to the
Yeah.
podcast probably anyway.
I
So,
just feel like there's so much stuff like that within the solar industry that turns people off from it,
yeah.
like that and, on the homeowner side, stuff like the
Were,
door-to-door salesman.
yeah, were you at the NABCEP conference?
Not this past year. The last one I went to was in St. Louis.
So they had this really awesome keynote speaker, and I'm trying to think of his name, but he's a state legislator from Nevada, from Las Vegas, and he's really young, and he's on a mission to go after what he calls the solar bros. And so
Okay.
they're like in that class of people that are the door-to-door salespeople that ripped off his elderly parents and
Mhm.
sold them something that they couldn't use and it didn't even work and it didn't turn on. And he's got like this big old story of how he got into it. And he heard so much about it. And he's got all these constituents that were going through the same problem as his parents. And I think he did some big magazine article and they wrote a law, of different ways to go after these
Hmm.
people that are just like the unethical door to door, as he calls them, solar bros. And so that was kind
Yeah.
of like after he talked at the keynote at the beginning of the conference. During the conference, oftentimes we were talking about solar bros or making solar bro jokes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I knew exactly the type of person you were talking about as soon as you said Solar Bros too.
Yeah.
Didn't even have
Yeah.
to describe it. I'm like, yep, that makes sense.
And there's like this whole culture of them, and they have their own conferences that none of us really see and stuff like that.
Not important enough.
So I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping that I can get this guy,
Onto the show
exposed.
and
Yeah,
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 see what's kind of going on in their head, you know?
yeah. Figure out how NABCEP certified he is and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe give him a couple of questions off the test and just
Oh yeah, it's like
see how that
ask him if he
goes.
knows what a kilowatt hour is. I bet he
You
doesn't.
could describe it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's the amount of kilowatts per hour.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
No. But that, I mean, that was one of the hard parts about finding a job, over the couple of times that I've been searching for jobs in the solar field. You go on Indeed and you search solar in Chicago, and 90% of the jobs are going to be door-to-door salesmen. And they word them in the weirdest ways, to kind of hide that it's a door-to-door job, or market it, with like $300,000 salary, all
Yeah.
commission based, of course. So, you have to end up going to like Indeed and typing solar and then the minus sign and then sales. So you don't get anything that pops
Oh.
up with sales because
Uh-huh.
it just ends up being too much and overwhelming.
Wow. Wow. And I'm sure there are like some ethical, good sales jobs out there to some
Sure.
degree,
Yeah.
especially maybe more like commercial and stuff like that.
I mean, even our sales team, like our
Mhm.
sales team don't do door to door, but we have good internal qualified leads and good advertising, and we're on Tesla's certified installer program, so we get sent a lot of their leads. So there's ways to do it that aren't, scummy.
Yeah, by being like good and good at what
Yeah,
you do. Yeah. Getting a
exactly. You got to be.
reputation. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what some of the things that I tell people to do is to look on the NABCEP website to make sure that somebody from the company is NABCEP certified. Hopefully, the person selling it doesn't have to be NABCEP PV Technical Sales, just any kind of NABCEP. Even the
Hmm.
associate, tells you something. Oh, one thing too, I think that part of this guy's law had to do with was to make sure that they were actually working for somebody that was licensed. Because
Got
there's a
it.
lot of lead people out there that are just like independent and they're not working under any kind of license.
Yeah, people under like Freedom Forever and I mean, we can drop that if I can't name drop people, but
Yeah.
companies like that I
Yeah.
was offered a position to sell stuff door to door from them out here in Seattle that I didn't do, but I wouldn't have been certified doing that
Uh-huh. Yeah.
at the time. So,
Yeah. And then other things too is to look at their contractor's license and make sure that it's not, in trouble, that they're not in trouble or anything like that. And also, a lot of places too, like just depends on where you are, but this guy's law had something to do with like a waiting period. I believe we have that in
okay.
California too. So when somebody signs a contract, they can opt out of it within a certain amount
Hmm.
of time.
Okay.
So that it really helps the senior citizens. And so you always hear those stories about somebody that was like 90 years old, got a
Hmm.
contract for 20 years or, some kind of
Yep.
crazy thing like that. And so then they have their kids who are probably, 50 years old or something like that will be like,
Hmm.
oh, you ripped off my parents. And then there's time to get out of it. And
Yeah. I think that's great. I think it's important. Not that solar has the same stigma that, nuclear has, but, I think that there's a certain stigma sometimes about how solar can be and how solar is. And if one person in a community got ripped off, the whole community might hear about it to not want to do
yeah.
solar because that's how they think that it is.
Yeah, and I think in some way it might be partially the fault of the solar industry because we are letting our own do that. And I think
Hmm.
there's people like big corporations, maybe some of the biggest solar companies in the country that are doing residential that are taking these leads and they're also donating a lot of money to the big associations. Some of the things for residential that I don't like that people are lying about that are just technical things. They go like, "Oh, with a microinverter, you shade one module and it only takes away one module, and with a string inverter, you shade one module and it takes out the whole string." And that's just a complete lie because there's
Hmm.
bypass diodes.
Yep.
And the
It's
bypass
just,
diodes, of course, just bypass the shaded module. And with a string inverter, you shade a module and, you pretty much just lose that module
mhm.
or even a third of a module.
It just comes down to people not understanding it and get back to, having working with a company that is NABCEP certified or at least has licenses and
Mhm.
knows what they're doing with it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is even intentional by some of these higher ups. Yeah. And
Hmm.
another thing too that I see is like you'll see these companies where they have the CEOs and the executives and stuff, they don't understand the first thing about solar. Like they don't know what a bypass diode is. And they're
Hmm.
running a company and they're in charge of all these people. And it's like you could have spent the 1 week that this unemployed person did and get your NABCEP associate or something like that. And it
Hmm.
might save your whole company, Mr. Too Good to take an NABCEP associate exam.
It's really not that difficult, you know?
Yeah.
Like I feel like if you're working in it every day,
Uh,
the associate exam should be
no,
relatively easy for you, you know?
yeah, there's plenty of people. Like I've had people that were like in alcohol treatment programs. They didn't know the first thing about electricity, spend a week or even 4 days and take the test the fifth day and pass it. The associate
Yeah,
exam is
it
like,
just really it takes people, wanting to do it. And, if
yeah,
you're already in that managerial position, you don't care, then whatever, they're not going to do it, which is, I think unfortunate and, I think frustrating a lot for the people underneath them too, if they feel like they know the better thing to do because they know how it works and he's telling you something else because of what he believes in his head.
yeah, yeah. I remember I was doing a lot of work for this company called Solar Universe. And it was
Okay.
just like I was going in there once a month, teaching a class, sometimes even a little bit more, doing a couple extra things. It was a company that was like growing fast. It was like, I think I started doing it in 2009 and it lasted for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something like that. And it was really cool. And they were like helping people learn and they were doing franchising and they were getting like electrician companies across the country, Puerto Rico, wherever, to learn how to do solar and all that kind of stuff. And then the guy that started the company like got bought out. And then these people came in there and I just kind of felt like it was like slash and burn or something. Like they just pretty much liquidated it. They owed me some money. They didn't pay me back. I went to their office. They changed their address. There was no way to get in the door except for like tailgating, which means like somebody else goes in and you follow them. And I
Hmm.
finally get in there and there was like only one person that looked familiar out of this whole company and it was a call center. I mean, it was just like a bunch of people doing Solar Bros stuff, I think. And so they like the Solar Bros took over this solar universe and just like ran it into the ground. And probably what happened is the CEO paid himself enough millions of dollars for the first
Hmm.
year and closed down the company and they went bankrupt and they owe my friends like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I mean, I
Uh,
feel like that's just been a bad thing in the solar industry for,
yeah.
I mean, as long as I can remember, just so many companies going under for either that reason or another too. And I've dealt with that a lot at some solar O&M companies that I've worked with, kind of dealing with all these companies going out of business for whatever reason.
Yeah. Did you ever see that movie Up in the Air?
I have not.
So it's this company. It was a pretty good movie, and it's about this guy. You might have heard of him. His name is Clooney, George Clooney, and some woman named Julia Roberts, who you might have heard
Okay.
of too. And
Mm-mm.
so they meet and they're traveling all the time. I think they met at the hotel. And a lot of it kind of reminds me of my life in some way because I'm traveling all the time. So it's like getting airline points and hotel points and how to pack your bag when you're traveling.
Hmm.
So some of that actually was practical. But then what George Clooney's job was to go in and fire people. And so the company would figure out that we could make more money by liquidating people and laying them off and all this kind of stuff. And so he would go around and he'd be like laying people off. And that just kind of reminds me of what happens sometimes with these companies where they figure that they can make more money by just high CEO pay and making the company go bankrupt. You know, I
Hmm.
think that there was a company that was a big argument about people against Mitt Romney. And so
Okay.
he would work for some company called Bain Capital, and I think they did some of that, where they would go in there, take a company, and liquidate it. I remember when we were speaking of protesting before, and when I was younger, there's this redwood forest company called Pacific Lumber up in like Mendocino, Humboldt County area, and they had all these forests, and they were cutting down redwood trees, and people didn't like that. And there was like 96% of the old growth redwoods had already been cut down. And then somebody like a hedge fund guy named Charles Hurwitz from Texas came in and bought out the company, like did a takeover or something, sort of like what
Okay.
Elon did for Twitter. And he decided that these trees were worth more dead and he was going to liquidate the forest. And then I went to this protest, and there's like Woody Harrelson, Jerry Brown, Mickey Hart. We're all there marching around in the forest. Bonnie Raitt got arrested. And then this woman, Julia Butterfly was her name, she climbed a tree and stayed in this tree for like about 2 years.
I heard about
And
that. I actually just read about that the other day.
oh, did you? Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I was there, and, and we were camping out and stuff. And one of my friends and neighbor, her name is Karen Pickett, and she has this organization, a nonprofit called Bay Area Coalition for Headwaters, and that was for Headwaters for us. So send her lots of money; she deserves it. And there was some crazy stuff too, where like two of these activists got bombed, and Judy Berry, and she ended up dying, which was probably like sort of a result of the bombing. Like there was somebody put a bomb in their car under the seat.
Jesus.
And so I know my friend was like testifying for it. And then they were, and so it was like all kinds of crazy bad stuff going on, you know, and but yeah, back in those protest days, but that was just like an example of, you know, liquidating the company. So, you know, go over, buy a company, sell all of its assets, give yourself high CEO pay, and then file for bankruptcy, and the creditors don't get paid. So it's sort of a weird thing that we have corporations having like rights. Like a corporation can have all these rights, but then it can't go to jail. You know, like it's like jail the corporation.
Yep. And then if somebody does, it's usually somebody not in power, always a scapegoat.
Yeah, and it's like I have a corporation and all that stuff. But, you know, you got to play the game. You know, it's like I'm not going to go liquidate it or something. Well, I'm 100% owner of my corporation too, but
You can't now. Now you have it on
yeah.
video, you know?
Yeah, I know. Well, like say if the corporation goes bankrupt or something like that, it doesn't affect your personal, you know, like so you have protection and all that kind of stuff. But is that fair? You know, it's like, I don't know.
I think it depends on circumstances, which makes it tough. And I don't know too much about it, honestly.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Yuval Noah Harari? He wrote a book called Sapiens, but he just talks about what makes humans different is we have all these imaginary things that only exist in our mind, like money, corporations, you know, stuff like that.
Countries,
Religions,
everything.
countries, borders, you know, yeah, all that kind of stuff. It's just made up, you know, like, and that makes us different because, you know, our ape cousins, they don't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think civilizations are what really makes us compared to them, you know?
Yeah. Well, very cool. Yeah, it's really good talking to you. Is there anything else that you think we should talk about?
No, you know, I just wanted to thank you again. I think that your heat spring classes were very, very useful. And I recommend anyone who's, you know, planning to take their NABCEP, which if you're not, I recommend it. It'll change your life.
Okay.
To take one of the heat spring courses.
Oh, cool. Wow. Well, thanks for the plug. Thanks so much.
Of course, yeah. Plug you on your own podcast.
All
Might
right.
as well.
Okay. Well, I'll plug you. Whoever hired you, give them a raise, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sean told you to.
Yeah, they better do it. So I look forward to running into you in person one of these times. And I just enjoyed talking to you. It was a good conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I hope you have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Jacob Benzaquen. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast, where you, just like Jacob, could get your NABCEP PV Design Specialist, that's PVDS certification, and immediately move up the ladder in life. Save more planets. Get it done. Go to solarsean.com. Check out the show notes for more links. Woo!